Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. My name is Bruce Starr, and every once in a while, I get an incredible guest who has just done things in their lives that people only dream about. They only wish that they put their lives together in a way that can be as productive and successful and as literally earth changing for many, many, many people because of good decisions, quality decisions that this person who's going to be my guest has made in his life. And he is an absolute inspiration to everyone who already knows him. And he's going to be an incredible inspiration to those of you who are just hearing about my guest for the first time, other than some headlines in the newspapers. So, without no further ado, my guest today is by far the most successful sports agent in NFL history, which means the world. No one has been more successful. And if I'm wrong, Leigh, you'll tell me. But over the years, with the numbers, the quality people that you've brought on board, that you've represented, and by the way, these people are not just great athletes. One of the things that I so respect you for is these people aren't just great athletes, but they are spectacular people, quality people. So, Leigh Steinberg, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're so glad to have you.
It's been my pleasure, Bruce. Happy to be with you.
You know, we've been in communication for a few years now. We've been internet connected. You were kind enough to do my show years ago when I think you were just coming out with your book, and that's how I got lucky enough to have you back then. So, Leigh, tell me, where were you born? Tell me about your family life and how that family life either pushed you in a certain direction of life or supported you or hindered you.
So I was raised in Los Angeles with two brothers, and my father, who was a high school principal and also very active in the Human Relations Commission of Los Angeles, which keeps harmony between different ethnic groups, had two core values he raised us with. Number one, treasure relationships, especially family. And number two, try to make a meaningful difference on this earth and help people who can't help themselves. So my brothers and I were hardwired with those principles. We knew that we had to find a way to help other people. My grandfather ran a country club called Hillcrest Country Club. And so I grew up every week on the laps of George Burns and Groucho Marx and George Jessel and Jack Benny. And our younger listeners won't know these people, but they were very famous comedians. And at one point I had a picture taken on Marilyn Monroe's lap. And
oh my God.
I had an autographed Elvis Presley guitar.
Leigh, so, I've got to tell you that, Leigh, my wife's middle name is Georgie because George Jessel was her godfather.
All right, that's great. So at any rate, grew up, went to, so those core values obviously shaped us, which is that it's great to have financial success, but what's really important is, were you a good father? Were you a good son? Were you a good brother? Were you there for people when it wasn't easy to be a friend? Were you there for them in critical situations? And then secondarily, what did you leave of value in terms of making positive changes to other people's lives? So from there, I went up to Berkeley in the late 60s, and I was student body president at the point that Berkeley was the vortex of all student life. It was the change in hairstyles and beards and tie-dye and rock music and anti-Vietnam. And the governor of California was Ronald Reagan. And so every time we demonstrated, he would crack down. And I had some really interesting interchanges. I learned everything I needed to learn about negotiating from dealing with then Governor, later President Reagan. And so I was a dorm counselor in an undergrad dormitory working my way through law school. And they moved the freshman football team into the dorm. One of the students was the quarterback on the football team named Steve Bartkowski. And we had other people in that dorm. I had a little bearded fella whose name was Steve, and Steve Wozniak went down and formed Apple Computer. So it was an interesting time, and there really wasn't any sports agency or sports law then. Teams could just hang up the phone and say, we agents. So Bartkowski asked me to represent him, and there I was, brimming with legal experience, never having practiced before. And I had the first pick in the first round of the NFL draft.
Wow.
He went to the Atlanta Falcons. So there was a USFL competing against the NFL, and we got the largest rookie contract in NFL history. Sort of the revelatory experience was landing the night before at the Atlanta airport, where the next day we were going to sign the contract. And we get to the airport, and I've been in Berkeley, and there are Klieg lights flashing in the sky like for a movie premiere. A huge crowd is pressed up against the police line, and the first thing we hear is, we interrupt the Johnny Carson show to bring you a special news bulletin. Steve Bartkowski and his attorney have just arrived at the Atlanta airport. We switch you live.
Wow.
So I looked at him probably the way that Dorothy looked at Toto when the house came down in Munchkinland, and said, I know we're not in Berkeley anymore. And so it was really then, Bruce, that I saw the idol worship and veneration that athletes were held across the country. And I thought, if I would encourage athletes to retrace their roots and go back to the high school community that helped shape them, set up a scholarship fund, work with the Boys and Girls Club or a church, and then at the collegiate level, rebond with those alums by doing something to stay current with the school. So a Troy Aikman is endowed a full scholarship at UCLA, or there in Miami, Edrin James endowed a scholarship at the University of Miami. And then at the pro level, we thought about charitable foundations. And could we find that one problem in an athlete's life that they'd love to make a difference on? And then put a charitable foundation together with the leading business figures, political figures, and community leaders to form an advisory board that will help implement a program. So for work done, former Tampa Bay and Atlanta Falcon running back, it's Homes for the Holidays, where he's put the 175th single mother and their family into the first home they'll ever own. And so it's athletes changing lives. It's Patrick Mahomes, 15 in the Mahomies. It's athletes taking on at-risk kids and diseases and poverty and all sorts of problems. And so here we are 47 years later.
Wow. And we're going to discover a lot more in between, because the movie, Jerry Maguire, way before I knew you or knew who you were or knew anything about you, Jerry Maguire was probably one of my favorite movies of all time, because I so admired not who that character Tom Cruise played his life, but how he played it. So in that movie, when there's so many incredible parts there, but the part that got me the most was kind of in the beginning. when now I'm understanding why who that guy was in the movie that wrote that paper, that wrote that report. And that was really you. Tell me about that.
So obviously, the philosophy of our firm is the athlete is role model, and it's listening to athletes in a holistic way. So the most important skill, Bruce, I think in life is listening. It's how to draw another human being out, cut below surface responses, and hone into what their real introspective greatest fears and anxieties are and their greatest hopes and dreams. Because if you can create enough silence and good space around another person that you truly understand them, then you can navigate your way through life gracefully. So it's the key to recruiting, it's the key to negotiating, it's the key to every interaction that we have. So it's all about principles and it's all about shared values. So I'll profile players to make sure they're comfortable with the concept that they will be a role model, that they will trigger imitative behavior. And so whatever part of that translated onto the screen, it's the whole subtext and mantra of our practice.
So please, before we leave Jerry Maguire, I know I'd love to hear more about what it was like when those guys were there watching you, looking at you, observing you, probably sitting in your office with you when you were on the phone. Spend some time with me and let me know what that experience was like.
So I got a call in 1993 from Cameron Crowe, who is a writer-director, and I had seen the movie adaptation of a book he wrote called Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and I thought it was very funny. And I knew he was into rock criticism and wrote for Rolling Stone. So he asked if he could spend time with me to pick up atmosphere around a movie whose central character would be a sports agent. So he went with me in 1993 to the NFL draft in New York, where I had the first pick, Drew Bledsoe. And then he came up on the flight we took for the initial press conference with Bill Parcells. And he came to the league meetings in Palm Desert, where I was showing off a free agent named Tim McDonald. And I introduced him to owners and general managers and other agents and players. And he sort of was a fly on the wall watching the whole process. And then he came to pro scouting day at USC. And then he came to a series of games with me. And as you inferred, he sat in my office and I told him stories, lots and lots of stories. So I was also technical advisor. So I had to vet the script to make sure that the willing suspension of disbelief that holds you in a movie where you as a sports fan won't say that dialogue's phony, that look is phony, not that way, got preserved. And then I got assigned actors like Cuba Gooding Jr., who played the wide receiver Rod Tidwell. And I took him down to the Super Bowl in Phoenix, and he had to pretend he was a wide receiver for a week. So he hung out with Amani Coomer and Desmond Howard. And I actually had to show the quarterback in the film, Jerry O'Connell, how to throw a spiral because he had gone to NYU and they didn't have football there. So at any rate, so for the last 22 years, I've never walked into an airport or been out to dinner where someone at some point didn't run up and either say to me or ask me to say those four iconic words that start with "show me the." And at any rate, and it became the top grossing sports film of all time before The Blind Side came around. And what I liked about it was it humanized the concept of what can be a sports agent. It showed some of the true caring that goes on. So Warren Moon, the quarterback of the Oilers and Vikings and Seahawks and Chiefs, and I were together as lawyer and client for 23 years.
Wow.
And so you grow very close and bonded to your clients, and you see the potential. And one of the key features is planning for second career for them, making sure that when they end the first career, they can do what 3 of my athletes have done, which is become minority owners of teams. So you're trying to empower them. Or if you have someone playing for the 49ers, you say to a Brent Jones or Steve Young, who would be good people to network with, or just high tech and venture capital. So it's not by chance that a Brent Jones, a retired tight end from the Niners, put together a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund, or that Desmond Howard is the host of ESPN Game Day.
So maybe towards the end of the show, we can sort of go. You've gone through a lot of the clients. Some of them I would know, and some of them I would have no idea. But let's just stick with the movie just for a second. How close was it when you got your heart broken by that one player and his dad? How much truth was there to that?
Well, so if you take that sequence, we're back. It's the night before the draft. Drew Bledsoe is going to be the first pick in the draft the next day. And Cameron says, "What are you feeling today? What's your greatest fear?" And I said, "Well, suppose, unbeknownst to me, there was something going on, and Drew Bledsoe and his father were, in point of fact, talking to other agents, and I wake up the next morning and that's what happened." So it's not simply autobiographical, it's the concept in that situation, because I'm not sure if I got fired the night before the draft, I would have recovered yet.
Yeah, because that's heartbreaking. It's you put your heart and soul into not just the player, but his character, and not just his character, but the character of his family. And to be disappointed like that, it can stick a dagger in you if you let it.
So what we do, as you just alluded to, is profile prospective clients to make sure that there's a symmetry of values, and so that they understand their unique opportunity to make a difference, and they understand their obligations to make a difference. So again, I think that Jerry Maguire shows the struggles that so many of us go through, and the ethical problems. So one of the problems in this society is situational ethics. That means that someone might be nice to cats and dogs, a good person at home, a good father, and then goes out into the business workplace and uses heinous social Darwin methods because the end justifies the means, because it's just business. And that leads to a type of soul death. So that was one of the subtexts of Jerry Maguire, which is the ethical bump and pull that we all feel when you start to see your work in a different way, and the ethics and values in a different way. It causes a type of soul death and a bifurcation of personality that's very hard to maintain.
So how was it for you when this movie premieres? Number one, did the people behind it did they think this was going to be a winner? Did they think they were hoping, tell me about the support that the film got?
Well, here was the thing. The casting was right. So if you remember, that's Renee Zellweger's big breakout role.
Spectacular.
That's Regina King playing the wife, who's the same Regina King, here now. That's Jerry O'Connell, who was in Stand By Me, playing that role. That's Tom Cruise, who was the hottest box office star in the country at that point. it just goes layers and deeper and deeper. And Cameron is so creative. He's so funny that, and he's so nuanced and textured in respect to how he sees human character and foibles in nature, that the minute that they signed Tom Cruise, it was pretty clear that was going to be a hit. And because at that point, he can carry a movie, but the love story in it meant that that movie was accessible not just to hardcore sports fans, but to anybody struggling in their career, to anyone trying to balance work and marriage and relationships. Those are universalities. So I thought it would appeal on that standpoint. Plus, Cameron writes vivid characters, and his dialogue is spot on. So we thought it'd be a hit. Did you know 21 years later that that movie would still show somewhere on television almost every day?
Every day.
Yeah, no, I didn't. And but thank God for that. Thank God for residuals.
And like you have to worry about it. But the other thing is that if you look between the lines, if you look real closely, you were someone who was 100% into that business. There was an imbalance in your life. If you look real closely at that movie, and there was heartbreak, there was running and sweating and going from place to place. I would think Jerry Maguire showed someone who was out of balance. And I believe that represented you to a degree.
One gets into this concept of what's next, what's next, what's next. And it prevents enjoying current achievement because it's always on to the next thing and next thing. And I got to the point where, I've done in football 64 first round draft picks.
Oh my God.
Then I had done the very first pick in the draft every year for 8 years, which is pretty hard. And so then I got to the level where I was only competing against my past achievements. We had 90 players in football, 86 had been to the Pro Bowl, and 12 of them are now in the Hall of Fame. And then we had a big baseball practice with my partner, Jeff Morad, and a big basketball practice. And I was involved with saving teams like the Giants, keeping them in San Francisco, and wrote a couple books, and we were raising and doing incredible stuff for charity. So Madeleine Albright and I put together a program when she was Secretary of State called Adopt a Minefield, where you could demine an acre in Angola or Cambodia or Mozambique to allow more arable land and to stop them from exploding. I did an anti-racism program with the Anti-Defamation League called Steinberg Leadership, where we trained thousands of young volunteers, doctors, lawyers, teachers, in the 30 biggest cities across the country, how to spot skinheads and fight hate groups and promote ethnic tolerance. So the one thing I would credit myself for is the fact that I knew when I had my 3 kids that they'd only be that age for a short time. And luckily I'd gotten my business to the point where I could be there for the soccer games. I could be there at night, and I changed my life. I made sure the evenings were for my kids, and I made sure I was there for the big events in their lives. But sure, there was a total imbalance at the beginning because you're building.
So Leigh, so much accomplished, so clear of focused that you want to help other people. So many things you've done. I mean, it's mind-boggling, all the quality people you've represented and all the good work they've done. But there was a downside to your life.
So in the early 2000s, a series of events in my private life, not my work life. I always understood that, notwithstanding the greatest planning we could ever do, that you might walk into the office and something went awry. Everything wasn't perfect. You don't have to win everything, recruit every client. There's life there. But my two sons were diagnosed with an eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa, which starts with night blindness and leads to a total narrowing of the visual field. So the older one's blind and the next one's getting there. There was nothing I could do about that. There was no cure, there was no funding. Then my father died a long death of cancer, and he was a seminal key figure in my life. And then we had a home in a beach city, Newport Beach, that developed mold, and we had to move out the day we tested and never came back and had to knock it down. And it started to feel like Job in, or what Moses did to the Pharaoh in Egypt, is locust next, is river of blood next, one after another. And I mistakenly felt that I had some power to protect my family, keep them housed, keep my sons from, keep my father from, and if I only worked harder, if I only was more creative, if I only found better treatment or something, that I could protect them, and I couldn't. And so it made me feel like Gulliver on the beach, tethered down with Lilliputians sticking forks in me. And I turned to alcohol, which I was not a lifelong big drinker. And pretty soon, I got to the point where everything flipped in 2007, 8, 9, and I became addicted to alcohol. And so first I had to break denial because I was still functional, but I had to break denial. And then surrender to the fact I was an alcoholic, and then seek help and work a 12-step program. And so I moved into sober living for a while and shut down my office, shut down my home, shut everything down, and said, this is the crisis. And I'm not a starving peasant in Darfur. I don't have the last name Steinberg in Nazi Germany in the late 30s. I'm not sick in any way other than self-induced. What excuse do I have not to live up to my father's values? And I had an epiphany. And so I dropped everything and said, whatever else happens in this life, my number one priority is being sober, because without that, nothing else will happen. And then being a good parent. And if that's all that happens in this, then I'll be fine. And so I'm now in my 12th year of continuous sobriety. And obviously we rebuilt a business, but the real, quote, comeback from that devastation was being able to be a successful father and sustaining sobriety. And the work part is just a cherry on top.
Most interesting and inspirational part for so many people that are going to watch this is, how do you, other than stop drinking, we know that you have to do that. How does someone recreate such a successful business when sort of everybody around you knows that you're trouble? That's the way it was for a while. Everybody knows Leigh is trouble. Can you depend on Leigh? Can you not depend on Leigh? How did you fight your way back to step one?
So I turned the practice over to the younger agents because I knew that they were really good people and the athletes would be fine. But the point is, I just gave up everything and focused on that one task, What will save you over and over again, Bruce, is resilience. It's having a central sense of optimism, even amidst destruction and cratered circumstances. But I was raised by a dad who was endlessly optimistic. And so if I go into a barn and there's a big pile of horse defecation, I'm sure in my mind there's a pony in there somewhere, if I could just find them. And so it's being able to have a spark of the belief that life will knock you back, but that you can come back. It's inevitable that life will knock you down. But, if someone's out there struggling because of problems with addiction or depression, there's help available, and you don't have to do it alone. You can do it with a series of other people. I credit so many amazing people in my life for being with me and helping me when I was vulnerable. But I always had a vision that's not grandiosity, but that I was put here for a certain purpose, and I had lost a sense of proportionality, right? In other words, it's not the outside world, it's how you perceive it. And so I'd lost the sense that you can get through the loss of a parent, sickness of children. You can get through it all, and you don't have to turn to a substance for it. And when you're at the worst, you've got to have hope, and you have to have people around you who will hold out hope. And so I never felt I was alone and isolated. I had wonderful people, family and friends that didn't look away.
A 12-step program is, really a miraculous program. A lot of people know about it, and it's certainly someplace that anyone can start. It's almost in any town. You can go to a meeting, probably, depending on the town you live in, there could be a dozen meetings every day and every hour of the day.
I'm in Orange County, and there must be a meeting of a unique fellowship within driving distance, 4 or 5 every hour. So they're everywhere. You just have to reach out for help.
Can you make other suggestions while we're on the subject? Where else could people look that have, and I'm not saying you're an expert, but are there other places you could suggest for people that are watching this who are suffering from different addictions?
Find a 12-step program. That's the first key. So the key to it all is break denial. It's really hard because addiction's the problem that tells us we don't have a problem. Other people have a problem. Other people have a problem with our behavior, but I'm not hurting anybody. So the first thing is to break denial. I think it's really helpful to accept the concept of a higher power in one's life, that because part of the problem with addicts is, as I told you, that we believe that we can fix everything, that we have all power. But if you can convince yourself someone else is in charge and you're along for the ride, that's a helpful concept. If you join that unique group, you need a sponsor, and you need someone who will help you. And then you need to be surrounded by like-minded people, because they'll understand, they'll get it in a way that's really hard. Before my brain changed to alcoholism, I didn't understand why people couldn't stop. I thought it was willpower. I didn't know it was a disease that affects an organ and is progressive. And so the point is, it's only within the fraternity or sorority of like-minded people who also are struggling with the same problems. So, you know what the groups are, and they end in anonymous, and so it's getting the help from a group. getting a sponsor, someone in your life that can guide you through the process. These are all helpful. Plus, just some basic things: exercise, making sure that you're getting up and out is important. Sunlight's important. Not over caffeinating is important. I mean, there are a load of some people turn to meditation. There are really an endless amount of things, but some of it's just about good health.
Absolutely. Years ago, I might have been living up north at the time, but I do remember Darryl Strawberry went through a time when he went into, it was probably rehab, not 12 step. And all the camera crews were there when he was coming out. And I was familiar with 12 step program, not for alcohol or drugs, but for some of the other helpful things. And I remember watching the reporters with cameras circling around on him. And I was really curious about what he was going to say. And I remember that he said, when they asked him, "How was it, Darryl?" And Darryl said, "The speakers in there were amazing. I learned so much from them." He was very humble, but there was one thing that I was listening for, one thing I was hoping to hear from him. And because of my background in listening to 12 step, I needed for him to say that there's a power greater than himself. And he didn't. And I was disappointed, and I said either to my wife or my girlfriend, he's got some more hurdles to cross over before he's going to be healed. And it was true.
I understand. I treated the whole experience like I was going back to school, that I had to relearn everything. And when it starts to work is when you stop intellectualizing the reasons why a 12-step program, why I'm unique, this can't help me, and all the intellectual arguments that this ideology is, flawed and all the rest of it. At a certain point, if you have a problem and there's an emergency and they have a proven method of helping you be happier in life, just give it a try.
How much resistance did you get? Rejection did you get? It's one thing to have your family behind you. It's one thing to be getting right in your headspace. But the interesting part was, how much resistance did you get from the outside world that you depended on before, fighting back from all that?
First of all, I knew I needed to wait. I'm not cured of alcoholism. I'm still a bun in the oven cooking, and I'll be cooking for a lifetime. So all I really say about that is how many years I have or how many days I have, because there's a whole period of time when you're an alcoholic where you every time there's a crash or relapse, you tell everyone coming out of it, this time's different. This time I've got it. This time I understand. And you're not intentionally trying to lie. I mean, you mean it in that moment, but it has no connection with what you're actually going to do. And so this time I thought, I'm not going to say a thing. I'm not, if I can help people and by being open, I'll do it. But I'm just going to stay in the process and just keep, working away. So part of breaking denial is an understanding that the business of sports representation is hyper competitive. Oh my goodness, you have hundreds of people fighting for every single athlete. So I had to be realistic about the fact that there'd be people who would say, how can you guarantee you'll stay sober? Or you didn't do a great job managing your own money, you're getting a little long in the tooth there, or how do we know that you still have contacts and that you're still relevant? So I wrote an autobiography, and I went back, and ultimately I've spoken on 85 college campuses. So I reintroduced myself to a younger generation that maybe 6 or 7 years has passed since I was actively representing athletes. And they didn't know, history for Gen Z started yesterday, or maybe today, or maybe just this moment. So I understood all of that. So part of it was building back the infrastructure of relationships with owners, general managers, coaches, college coaches, high school coaches. It's that whole, and the great breakthrough came, I had a younger partner who's excellent named Chris Cabot, who was with me in, critical to our success. And, but we signed Paxton Lynch in 2016, who was a first-round quarterback. So that was sort of seen symbolically as, well, I always represented the top quarterbacks, and now we got one again. And then the next year came Mahomes, and the year after that, Tua Tagovailoa and Jerry Jeudy, and a bunch of other players. So I don't have a divine right to represent athletes. They have a need, and so they come to me. So you're always doing that, but I knew there would be families and athletes who would still relate to the concepts of role modeling, second career, holistic approach, a long, fruitful lifetime, and so that all came to pass.
So appreciate the time you're spending and how generous you are sharing your story, how inspirational it is. And it's going to be to so many people. But, one of the great comeback stories ever was how you came to represent this young Patrick. Tell me about the wind up to that and how that all came about.
Patrick was a quarterback at Texas Tech, and he had to throw the ball on almost every play because their defense was so awful that they give up 55 points. So people underestimated him because they saw him under the pressure to throw, score, and didn't realize how he projected into the pro game. His father was an ex-baseball pitcher, great parents. So the first discussions are always with the parents. And we bonded, I think, right from the start. They knew everything about pro sports. They wanted their son to be a role model. They wanted him to, have a long, fruitful career. So, and then you met Patrick, and grounded, splendid personality, caring for other people, and real determined. And then you saw his freakish skills. So he wasn't so highly regarded at the start, but by the end, he ends up being the 10th pick in the first round, and he goes to the Kansas City Chiefs, which is a marriage made in heaven with their great ownership and front office and Andy Reid as a coach. And I knew he would eventually be an outstanding quarterback, but you couldn't think that in his first full year of starting, he'd be MVP of the league and the next year win the Super Bowl. So this has all happened in 4 seasons, and one of which he didn't play in. So he's one of those athletes that comes along every so often. I think by the end of his career, if it continues, he'll be seen as a Michael Jordan, as a LeBron James, as a Tiger Woods type, because he still works hard. He's got a sensational work ethic, and he's still hungry, and he'll be that way. And plus, he's a great leader and a teammate. What you look for, Bruce, in a franchise quarterback, and it's what I've specialized in, is obviously they need all the requisite skills, but 30% of games are blowouts, but most of them come down to the last quarter and increasingly to the last drive. There's like very balanced. So what happens when that critical player is faced with adversity? So Mahomes is throwing a couple interceptions. The crowd's starting to boo. The center's looking at him like he's on hallucinogens. The game's getting out of hand. They're way behind. Now what do you do? And it's the same quality all of us need. Can you compartmentalize, adopt a quiet mind, tune out the past and any extraneous detail or input, and elevate your level of play and take a team to and through victory in those critical moments? And that ability to perform in adversity, but to tune out every negative thought, to tune out every stimulus that's not going to help you, and to just get into the zone and achieve, that really is critical.
Leigh, this last 5 minutes has been, something that will help people, athletes, business people for a long, long time to come. And I really appreciate it. You're also, see, with you, you're not just leading great athletes. We've come to learn that you've got to make sure that they're the kind of people that share their lives, you share your life, and you're not just working with athletes, but you're teaching others how to be sports agents. Tell me all about that, and then I want to know about your books before I let you go.
Okay. So my thought process, along with Chris Cabot, was how do we bring along the next generation of sports professionals? There's a huge interest on college campuses, business school, law school, and even people thinking about second career, to have a career either in the front office with a team, a league, a conference, and athletic department, to work in marketing or PR or broadcast or every type of journalism or branding or facilities management. And so I thought, one goes to law school, business school, and they teach you the principles of the law. But when I graduated from law school, I didn't know how to run an office, do very much. So we have attacked it from two concepts. One is the Agent Academy that we've done probably 25 times. And there we get young people up, and they have to recruit an actual athlete.
Wow.
They have to do the pitch. And they've done Patrick Mahomes and Ronald Jones at Tampa Bay and Jayon Brown at Tennessee. They've done a whole slew of players and their families. So they've got to make the pitch. And then we get them doing a negotiation problem. Half of them play general managers, half play agents, and they negotiate.
Wow.
They have a laundry list of what they. And then we have them do a branding marketing program where they set somebody up on the internet. They have to create a website for them, and then they have to figure out how they're going to accrue Twitter followers and Instagram, and not that you and I know anything about TikTok, but all social media presence, and then how you market that. And then they do a charitable foundation, and they have to learn how to set that up. And then they do damage control. Now their client has gotten in trouble. Now what do you do?
Wow.
So it's all that training. So that's one set. The sports career conferences are, they have an hour on media, an hour on front office job, an hour on every permutation. So there's a vast field. But the point is, can we create the next generation which have specific skills, but also understand that with sports we can tackle bullying, sex trafficking, domestic violence. Lennox Lewis doing a PSA, a public service announcement that says real men don't hit women. Do they understand that we can tackle the environment? We can tackle all these through the imitative power of role modeling. And we want their careers to be special, where it's meant something unique that they were there. And we don't want them bifurcating their value system where they think, you know, to succeed, you have to turn into some monster.
Give me the website where people can track this, learn more about it, and see how they can attend.
SteinbergSports.com. And you'll see all of our educational programs there. And, you know, I've got 8 interns this summer. So it's all about mentoring the next generation and having a vision of how we all, in our own way, in our own time, it can be good parenting. It can be making a difference in so many different ways, but we all have this opportunity and rewarding role to play in our own time, in our own way.
And the books, a couple of books that you're most proud of, and I'll flash it afterwards.
Let's see. Some years ago, I wrote Winning with Integrity, How to Get What You Want Without Losing Your Soul. And it's the 12 steps of negotiating. So most people get anxious about the concept of negotiating, and they either, if they're negotiating with and we all negotiate, right? We husbands negotiate with wives as to who's doing the domestic chores, where they're going on vacation, where they're going out to dinner that night. Parents negotiate with kids on curfew and all the rest of it. Everybody has a job. They may have to negotiate with their boss. We buy cars. We buy all sorts of things. So it's a primer that shows you how to do win-win negotiating. Again, put yourself in the other person's heart and mind. Then I wrote The Agent, which is sort of an autobiography set against the backdrop of a lifetime. And I continue to write them, working on a project right now, which should be a continuation of where The Agent leaves off, and I'm still in early recovery, and I haven't had this last 7-8 years. And so it'll pick that up. Plus, I do a thing on Facebook called Wednesday Wisdom, and they're just little life advice. And so we'll integrate that too. It's just, we have so much as people to share, so many commonalities, and we begin to believe that we're the only person suffering from that thought or that disappointment. And in reality, it's just one big mass of humanity. And we're social creatures, so we need the bonding and support of other people. But we wear masks all the time and never speak to what really is bothering us. And I don't do that anymore.
That's so wonderful to hear. You know, about a week or 10 days ago, I had on perhaps the most powerful, successful personal manager to the stars, movie producer, movie mogul, Larry Thompson, who told an incredibly inspirational story. And now to have on the most successful, powerful, and inspiring professional agent, football agent, it's such an honor for me, but I feel so grateful and so honored that I can share these inspirational stories about succeeding in a very tough world. And you've been just terrific, Leigh. I just can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Thank you, Bruce. It was a pleasure to be with you, and you do a great show.
Well, again, thanks. Thank you, everybody. I hope you'll send this video around to as many people as possible so they could learn about incredible and inspirational lives, lifetimes, work. It's just a lot of great stuff. Leigh Steinberg, my name is Bruce Starr. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye, everybody. Till next time. Now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. I've been told by a lot of the comedians I knew and represented during the 80s, I looked the same as I did 40 years ago. And come to think of it, I still have my thick brown hair and just a few wrinkles. But most importantly for me, by simply applying the completely safe human growth hormone homeopathic gel on my skin just 2 times a day, the depression and panic attacks I suffered from years ago were gone in just 2 weeks. And then I started deep sleeping for many hours at night. You know, you can have the gel work for you too. To find out more, contact me at bruce@brucestarproductions.com.